We are approximately 1 month away from the 2023 NHL draft. There's going to be lots of activity. There always is. Today we're going to discuss a lot of the different trade rumors of circulating around what picks or players we might see traded at this draft. We'll get into all that coming up next. So welcome back to another video here at Top Shelf Hockey. As I mentioned, today we're going to take a look at some NHL trade rumors, but we're going to look at stuff that's a little bit further into the future, things that we think are going to likely happen around the 2023 NHL draft. The draft is always a very exciting time. Not only are you seeing a lot of top players get selected to different NHL teams and see teams change and transform based on those selections, but it's always a busy time as well when it comes to NHL trade activity. The first and second day of the draft, and even the couple of days leading up to it, usually involve a lot of activity, some of which is just picks being moved. A lot of times it's players as well. So we're going to get into the latest speculation from around the league. Of course, I've already taken time to research and source this out from all kinds of different NHL insiders and reporters. This is kind of a compilation of everything I've read and seen here going in the rumor mill in the last number of days and recent weeks. Now, of course, PierreLuc Dubois in Montreal, we've seen that connection a lot. I'm not going to really get into that one a whole lot here in this video because we've talked about it a lot in the past. I don't really have any new information. I know in recent days I've talked about the fact that a Winnipeg athletic writer who covers the Jets was talking about the discussions that happened around this player at last year's draft and some of the package deals that were reportedly discussed. For example, Winnipeg, if they were going to trade Dubois to Montreal last year's draft, they wanted Nick Suzuki. Obviously, Montreal was not interested in that. They know Dubois wants to come to Montreal. I think they'd love to have him. They know that he can eventually get there as a free agent if he plays his cards right. And at that point, they're willing to either, counter offer or just be patient and wait. The counter offer was reportedly a combination of Christian Dvorak, Josh Anderson, and a draft pick going back to Winnipeg in exchange for Dubois. Obviously, Winnipeg wasn't completely sold on that and decided to reject, and they never got any further on that. There was reports that Dubois was out the draft, and it was speculated. It never went down, and that's all we really know. A lot of people think that Montreal and Winnipeg will reignite talks, but we're not going to get into any more details on that. I do have a video a few days ago discussing the latest we know on that, and that's basically all we have. But there's lots of other players around this draft. This is not going to be just a PierreLuc Dubois show. Lots of other players that are, fairly high profile and some higher picks could be moved as well at this draft, and we could see a lot of substantial change. Now, of course, as I record this video as well, the NHL and the NHLPA are undergoing meetings this week to determine what next year's salary cap is going to be. Now, it sounds like we're probably not going to know the final answer to that until closer to the draft. So it's going to impact a lot of teams' ability to make moves as well. We know it's going to move by at least $1 million, but there is a possibility it could go up by 1.5 or 2, probably a maximum of 3, but probably less than that, if we're being honest here. Based on what we've heard from different reports, the NHLPA is not willing to change anything when it comes to escrow. So obviously that's going to impact what the NHL will do, but based on revenue not quite being where it needs to be to pay off the debt, basically the players still owe the owners from the COVID stuff. We're not quite at a point where we can see a big escalation. That'll probably come next summer. We'll probably see a much bigger increase. But rather than to get $1 million now and say, $5 to $7 million next year, they'd like to find a way to do something in between where they get a smaller bump now, and then next year's bump will still be more substantial, but not quite as substantial as it could be otherwise. So obviously that's going to impact a lot of this stuff as well. But for example, one of the things we could see is a top 5 pick possibly traded. Now, it's rare that this happens, and I'm going to say that of all the things we're going to talk about today, it might be one of the lesser likely things to happen. But the Columbus Blue Jackets are picking in the top 5. They have the number 3 overall selection. We know that the Columbus Blue Jackets, of course, had a bad year this year, finished near the bottom of the league. I don't really think that was their intent. They weren't planning on being bad this year like some teams, like Chicago, for example, who went into the year knowing it was going to be bad. They stripped things down intentionally. They were tanking 100%. Columbus was not. They signed Johnny Gaudreau in free agency. They recently traded for Patrick Laine. Like, they wouldn't have made these moves if they were planning on being a bad team and rebuilding for an extended period of time. However, that did come, I guess, with this benefit of having a high draft pick as a result of everything. They did have a ton of injuries this year as well, which certainly played a role in their shortcomings, but This pick, Aaron Portzline, who covers the Jackets for The Athletic, was kind of questioning if it's potentially going to be up for trade. Now, like I said, it's rare that these picks get moved this high, so I'm going to say that Columbus probably sees a good potential here with this pick. They're going to likely not be able to get Bedard or Fantilli. I mean, Fantilli could slip to number 3. He's expected to go number 2, but you're looking at Leo Carlsson or probably Will Smith being as your 3-4 pick. So the Jackets have a real chance here to get a really good player. Now, that player may or may not be NHL ready right away. It depends. Like Will Smith's going to be playing college hockey for sure. Leo Carlsson, I can see him maybe going to the NHL right away. That's a possibility, but we'll have to wait and see. Either way, Portzline questions whether or not they might trade for a player like Elias Lindholm out of Calgary. Now, of course, the Flames are a team that's expected to make some changes. We just seen them clean house and have a new team here in the front office. Of course, Brad Treliving walked away on his own, so he obviously wasn't fired or anything, but still they had to make a lot of changes. Nonetheless, they did fire head coach Daryl Sutter, and they're going to have a new bench boss, which is going to make a big deal, big changes as well. We know many of the Flames players end of the season not feeling good about returning to Calgary. The Flames also have a ton of players, I think as many as about 7, that are pending unrestricted free agents. They're entering the final year of their deal. And, a lot of them were quite hesitant when they were asked about the potential of re-signing with the Flames. But now that they've seen lots of changes, Craig Conroy's the new GM, very, a good vision, you could say, had a great press conference, and I think a lot of the team and players feel very confident in the changes they're going to see. So obviously some of their opinions and minds might be changed after the changes we've seen Calgary make so far. Of course, they still need to hire a head coach. That's going to obviously go into part of this as well. But not all of those 7 players are going to be back. You not only have Elias Lindholm, you've got Tyler Toffoli, you've got Chris Tanev, you got Noah Hannafin, and Nikita Zadorov, and a few others. They're not all going to be back. It's just not possible based on their cap availability and the reality of the team at least making some changes. Conroy also made mention that he's definitely not bringing back the entire group of the core, so we'll have to see. But Lindholm is a player who's a former 40-goal scoring center. We know the Jackets could use help down the middle. He said he feel like could be a really good fit there as well. And would they be willing to trade at number 3 overall pick? If Calgary gets this offer, you have to think they're going to look long and hard at it, because as much as Conroy made it known that Lindholm was going to be one of his bigger priorities to sort out, there's no guarantee here that he makes the re-signing. You can suspect that Lindholm's likely going to be looking for a contract in the Bo Horvat neighborhood, maybe even a smidge more. And if Calgary does not want to commit to that, or if they find negotiations aren't going great, even though the relationship with Lindholm could likely be more amenable based on the changes, if they can't come to terms and it's not looking good, we could see a trade. And if they can get the number 3 overall pick, I think they have to seriously look at that. But again, I'm not sure that the Jackets pull the trigger. Lindholm's a real nice player, but is he worth that high of a pick? I'd have my reservations about making that move, but we'll see. That's the latest on that one. The Ottawa Senators and Alex DeBrincat. DeBrincat could be traded at the draft for the 2nd straight year. No guarantees that he is. I know Ottawa really likes him and would like to retain him. He's a restricted free agent with a qualifying offer of $9 million. Pierre Dorian's already been on record saying that he'd like to sign him long-term, and at the very least, if they can't work that out right away, that he would give him his 1-year deal at $9 million if he had to, which would kind of have an impact on the Sens cap space for sure. After all the additions they've made in the past year, their tight space is getting a little tighter. And secondly as well, they'd be walking into free agency possibly and risk losing him if they can't extend him halfway through the season. So, that's risky. But at the same time, they really like the player. The player apparently wanted to hold off and wait for ownership stuff to be sorted out before he made a decision, which is completely understandable, and we'll have to see. But they wanted to know as well. They said that they asked the player to let them know what they were feeling and thinking by the draft, because it's a prime trade opportunity. So if DeBrincat gets back to them and says, you know what, I appreciate everything, but this is not for me long term, they're likely going to look to make a move and see what they can get back. And there's lots of teams out there that would be interested for sure. I know you look to a team like the Hurricanes, who obviously just fell short in round 3 again. Could use an extra scoring winger of that caliber. He might be a good fit there. You got a team like Detroit, which would be, obviously he's from Michigan, hometown state. Maybe they work out something, although they're division rivals. I don't know, it'd be a little more complicated, but I guess they could have discussions. And there's other teams too. But could we see an Alex DeBrincat trade for the 2nd straight draft? It's possible, but a lot of that's going to depend on contracts. Now, another name that was a 1st overall pick not more than a few years back, Alexis Lafreniere of the New York Rangers. Could he be on the move with this year's draft? There is some talk and speculation that the Rangers are going to have a hard time re-signing all of their young players that are going to be either due for extensions or are already RFA status now, including Lafreniere, Kakko, K'Andre Miller. They're running into a bit of a cap crunch. They have to make decisions on some of these veteran players. Are they coming back? Are they not? What kind of mix do they want? And there are many people out there who really believe there's at least a good chance that Lafreniere could be dealt. If he is, there's a lot of talk that the Vancouver Canucks have heavy interest. Of course, his former agent is Emily Castonguay, who is now an assistant general manager with Vancouver. So a lot to believe that Lafreniere would be very comfortable, of course, with her being there to go to a new franchise, get a fresh start, and see if he can't take his his talents up to another level, closer to what was expected when he was drafted number 1 overall. He has been making improvements, there's no doubt, and I think that over time he's going to be a stronger player than a lot of people have seen in his entry-level deal. But at the end of the day, it's hard to say what the Rangers do here. They're certainly a team that were expecting big results this year. They didn't get it. They have more of a mix of veterans than young players, and with all the young players coming due for contracts, like I said, it's going to be challenging for them to keep them all. And you got to wonder if one of them, a higher profile one, even like Lafreniere, might be on the move. And if he is, Vancouver does make a lot of potential, sense for a landing spot. But again, Vancouver has their own cap issues, and that could be complicated. We'll have to see what the Rangers would want in return. Of course, Pittsburgh's going to be an interesting team to watch. They don't have their GM in place here as of yet, but as I record this, a lot of people think there's a really high probability it's going to be Kyle Dubas, former Leafs GM. We'll have to see if that gets confirmed. But a lot of people think that the Penguins are going to possibly be trading for a goalie, and this could happen at the draft, whether they target a guy like John Gibson out of Anaheim, who is from Pennsylvania, so certainly would be like a homecoming for him. A lot of people have said that they feel Gibson would entertain a trade to get into a more winning environment, considering how long of a rebuild the Ducks have been working on. And, obviously his numbers haven't been great. If you just look at his stats and you don't watch him play, you're going to be like, oh, geez, why would they do this? He's got, a lot of term left here, and the numbers aren't great, but he's a really good goalie in a different system. I think he could do a lot better. Not to say that the Penguins are, a defensive machine by any means, but still, it's an interesting concept. Connor Hellebuyck in Winnipeg, we know, might be available. UC Saros in Nashville, you got to wonder if some of these guys could. There's no guarantee that some of these high-profile goalies move, but there is some talk that they could be available. The Penguins are willing to trade their first-round pick and anything else that might be required. A guy like Dubois would probably want to come in and make a bold move to start things off. I could certainly see them, exploring this possibility. Sharks defenseman Erik Karlsson. This might be the best and possibly the only really good opportunity for the Sharks to get a deal done. Certainly his value is never going to be higher coming off a 100-point season. It's a rare feat by defensemen, and he certainly played last year, in my opinion, like he really wanted to get traded. Certainly showed that he's, all that and more, that you think he can't play anymore. And well, he proved you wrong this year. Likely going to win the Norris Trophy. He makes a ton of money, though. It's a lot of term left. The Sharks are going to have to eat some money on that contract. There's no doubt. There's a lot of people still think that wonder if the Edmonton Oilers might revisit this. I have my doubts that they do, though, to be completely honest. I think if Karlsson is dealt, it could be a different team. But Erik Karlsson, there was a lot of talk he could go to Edmonton. Edmonton would try to unload the Jack Campbell contract, maybe a player like Cody Ceci or Kailer Yamamoto for cap purposes, and maybe have to throw in, obviously, something else, whether it be a pick, prospect, something else to obviously satisfy the Sharks on that side of things as well. The Sharks eat maybe $2 to $3 million of his annual salary, knocking it down to that 8.5 to 9 range or something along those lines, and maybe we see what happens. But then you're looking at the Edmonton Oilers kind of, again, after giving an opportunity to Evan Bouchard after trading Tyson Barrie, now you're going to have Bouchard and Karlsson both running the similar type of job. That didn't work well with Karlsson before when he had to share the time with Brent Burns in San Jose. Since Burns left, he took off. Not a coincidence, I don't think. Not really fair to box out Bouchard either, because I think he's fully capable. So I'm not completely certain that this deal is still something we would see, although there are some out there that think that the Oilers will want to revisit. I don't know. I think Karlsson, like I said, if he's going to be traded, this is a prime time. And if he's not traded at the draft, it's going to get harder, because right after that, you go into free agency, teams spend their money, lose their cap availability, and start to form their rosters for next year. And I just don't know if the Sharks are going to be able to pull it off if they don't do it at the draft. Now, we can also see a case of Chicago trying to get up as high in the draft as we can. There's some talk that, of course, they have multiple first-round picks. Besides the first overall pick, they also hold pick number 19, which was originally a Tampa Bay Lightning selection, and they might want to try to take that pick and move it up even higher. Possibly a swap with a team like maybe Vancouver around that number 11 range that might involve them taking bad contracts. The Blackhawks are going to have all kinds of cap space and will be able to take on a couple of bad contracts to help teams out in order for the right incentive and asset coming back. Maybe they move Connor Garland or the final year of Tyler Myers or something else that they're really not fond of to the Blackhawks in exchange for swapping back. So maybe Chicago moves up to 11, Vancouver moves back to 19, and then they get rid of something that they don't like. That's a possibility that I've seen out there. But at the same time, if it's not Vancouver, look for Chicago to try to pick up something from another team that's higher in the draft to see if they can't move up, anywhere from another 5, 7, 8 spot to try to get back into that top 10 or top 12 range to get another top player besides Bedard to add to this rebuilding process. The St. Louis Blues, another team to watch in this draft. They have 3 first-round picks. They have pick number 10, 25, and 29. There's no doubt that they'll probably use pick number 10. I wouldn't completely guarantee that they do. There is a chance that pick could get moved, but I would not be shocked if they maybe use that one and use 25 and 29 for other purposes, whether or not they're moving those picks individually for a player who can come into their franchise and help out right away. Maybe they combine those 2 picks to try to move up into the teens or something higher in that first round as well. That's another possibility. But I think Doug Armstrong and the Blues are going to be active here. They're going to want to walk away from this first round, probably making 1 selection and making 1 or 2 acquisitions to improve their roster. There's no doubt with that kind of draft currency. He'd already made it and confirmed before that he was certainly open to making some deals. And with that kind of currency, you can see it. I mean, he's used it before. I mean, we've seen when he's acquired players like Braden Shen and Ryan O'Reilly in the past, this is the time that he's made it happen. And I think he's, now that those players like O'Reilly, for example, is gone from the team, we're looking for the next round of moves of that nature by Doug Armstrong. Now, the Buffalo Sabres are another team to watch. They have the 13th overall pick, and that pick is also very rumored to be in play, whether it be for a chance to move back and get extra assets, or if they can find a player that improves their roster immediately, such as a top 4 defenseman, or maybe even a starting goaltender. There's rumors that Buffalo, as much as they love Devin Levi, would want to take the pressure off him from having to be the starter right away, and they very well could package a player like Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen and this pick to get a more start caliber quality goaltender, whether it be UC Saros, Connor Hellebuyck. If those guys become available, look for the Sabres to be pushing hard in the mix to make an acquisition, and that pick could very much be in play. If they're not looking good for a goalie, like I said, a top 4 defenseman, they have obviously Rasmus Dahlin's a solid number 1. You got Owen Power and Matthias Samuelsson that are certainly becoming solid. Looks like they're going to be solid 2 and 3 type defensemen. They really need another D-man to round out that top 4. They do have some other defensemen on the roster that are certainly, you could say serviceable defensemen that will play NHL games in minutes, but not necessarily good enough to be a top 4. They could use one more D back there to really upgrade things, kind of like what the Ottawa Senators were trying to do earlier this year when they acquired Jacob Chychrun. The Sabres were certainly in on those type of deals as well, and would like to have one more D back there. So like that pick could be in play for one of those kinds of players. If it's not looking like it's going to materialize, maybe they fall back a little bit and get an extra asset that they can continue building towards other deals. But Buffalo, St. Louis, Chicago, definitely going to be busy. I expect teams like San Jose will try to move Karlsson. Like I said, the other teams, whether it be Columbus, Chicago, the Rangers, Vancouver, all going to be busy. Montreal, too, throw them in the mix with PLD. But, of course, like I said, I don't want to focus too much on him today, but it's certainly going to be a big part of the draft. We could see some mega names traded. Last year leading into the draft, in the last couple of years, we've seen a couple of blockbusters a day or two early leading into it, and I suspect we could see the same this year with more activity out of the draft. So let me know your thoughts. This is just the latest. There are going to be plenty more of this. I'll do these types of videos every so often leading into the draft over the next month as more information gets out there on what teams are thinking that they might do. Let me know your thoughts on what you think we'll see and what you hope we'll see down in the comments. We'll talk about it further. If you're new to the channel, make sure you subscribe and stick around. We'll keep you up to date with the latest news, rumors, and analysis of all 32 NHL teams. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you next time.